Hi, welcome back to the MCS podcast, current series. This is Lauren Koffman. I'm a neurointensivist at Temple University in Philadelphia. And today I'd like to welcome onto the podcast someone that was previously featured in one of our stories of hope, Elisabeth. And we're actually fortunate to be joined by her sister, Sarah, who's also a physician. So we'll kind of get both sides of the story. So thank you for joining us.
It's happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So before we kind of talk about what it was like kind of living through and recovering from the brain injury, can you just talk to us a little bit, Elisabeth, about like what was your life like before it happened? This was going back to about 2013, 2014, right?
Yep. So I was I guess a senior in college and I kept very busy. I was always working and I was a nanny and also had like another part-time job, was always busy and doing things. So I was very ready to graduate and start life after. I was coming back to Philly and very excited to be like reunited with my family after being 6 hours away in Boston for the past 4 years. So, um, yeah, I think that was pretty much everything leading up to it.
And what happened when you sustained the brain injury? Actually, was it the weekend that you guys were celebrating graduation?
Yeah, everyone had to come up for graduation, and it was the night before my big ceremony.
Yeah, I think it was after you had a couple graduations. It was the day of one of the graduations that you had, but
Yeah,
not the big.
my business school graduation, and then we went out that night before the major Boston University graduation.
Mhm.
So our family was there. I think you're at a Red Sox game, and then that's kind of when things took a turn, right?
Yeah, we have friends that helped us get these great seats up above the was it above the Green Monster or
No, to the left of it, sort of yeah, kind of in the outfield in
so
this kind of open area.
okay. Yeah. So it was like the third floor up and there were great seats. We are all having such a great time and just really happy to be like reunited and it was really great. But the game itself was kind of boring and some of my family members left, so we were waiting for the game to end kind of and we started gathering as the game ended. We gathered by the elevators to head home and I was like very excited still jumping on my dad's back like playing around and I jumped on his back and as I came down I hit the door and the door of the elevator and it kind of swung open like a doggy door and I slipped into the elevator shaft, falling about 20 feet.
20 or 30. Yeah, we don't know exactly for sure, but at least like 20 to 30 feet, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I think we're gonna have to rely on Sarah for some of the following sequence of events. But it sounded like you had a pretty significant kind of polytrauma. You had several injuries, and so on top of the brain injury, you had some other injuries. Could you just tell us a little bit about that, Sarah?
Yeah. I think part of it too is, she was in the elevator for at least like 30 minutes as they were kind of on top of the elevator shaft, I guess I should say, for about 30 minutes as they were securing the scene and trying to figure out how to get to her safely. And so, we were really worried in that time, sort of what her state was going to be. And as like a first year medical student at the time, I was really anxious to like get to her and kind of see how she was doing. When she came out, she was definitely like moving her limbs. And I think was trying to like they had a breathing mask on her, and I think you were trying to fight it, which is like definitely your fighting spirit. And then when we got to the emergency room and they started to assess you, they found out that you had bleeding into the brain, so both subarachnoid and in the brain tissue itself. And they also described this sort of acceleration deceleration injury where because it's like where you go really, really fast, really quickly, and then you stop all of a sudden, which is exactly what happened. And it kind of makes your brain kind of reverberate back and forth and causes this a type of injury. And then you also had these sort of bilateral or both sides of the jaw, the mandible were fractured completely. Those had to be repaired. And when they took you back to surgery a few days later, they realized that you actually also had this cut that went from underneath your chin all the way through to the inside of your mouth, as almost like something had been punctured. And so it was a lot of damage to the jaw and around that area, which is why you also got a breathing tube placed pretty early once they were able to get you out of the, into safety. And then some of the other things were some fractures to, parts of the spine, the transverse processes of the spine. So you were in a back brace. And then they thought that you might have had what's called a pneumothorax, so air around the lung that makes the lung collapse. So they did put in a chest tube to relieve that pressure. And then just a lot of cuts and wounds where they had to do some stitches, and
The teeth were pretty messed up too.
Yeah, you had a lot of broken teeth.
I mean,
And
you
that's kind
never
of what we
just had all
knew.
those facial like injuries, like seeing you now. I'm sure you went through a lot of like extensive like surgical repair for those injuries. And I mean, I'm assuming you don't remember any of the initial first few days in the ICU. Is that right?
No, I suffered from short-term memory for, I think it was almost 3 weeks. And I think part of it was just the mundane, like, same thing every day was difficult for me to like trace what was a memory and like what was just another day. So um I didn't remember the day before until like 3 weeks, like the second week of June. This happened May 15th or May 18th.
16th, 5/16.
Yeah. Happened May 16th, and then in second week of June, I was finally like, oh, yesterday, and referenced the day before, and everyone was kind of just stopped and like, what happened? What did you say? So yeah.
So I guess we'll talk a little bit next about what it was like in rehab, but do you remember in the hospital anything like that really like was comforting for you, or anything that like the people that were taking care of you like really did to like help keep your spirits up?
Only from hearsay from everyone else, but the nurses really took extra care of me and made sure to like brush out my hair every day and wash my hair. Typically, you would just they would just cut someone's hair off if it was as knotted as mine was, but they really made sure to just take care of my hair as much as possible. And I don't know, I feel like everyone treated me like their daughter in a way. They had just like a very kind feeling towards me.
And what was your perspective, Sarah? Did you feel like you were getting all that extra support from the staff as well, like you and your family?
Absolutely. I mean, we were there really around the clock. I mean, there's three sisters, spouses, kids, my parents. So there was really someone there all the time. In the beginning, we tried to do shifts overnight and like stay with her. And the staff was like, we got this, you got to go home and get rest and take care of yourselves. And it felt really good to know, like, okay, she's in good hands. They've got her. Um, and I think I remember Dawn from physical or occupational therapy. They just took really good care of her. They did things that they thought were going to be helpful tools for her, not just like what they would do for any patient. So definitely very cared for.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting, you talked about in the Stories of Hope, Elisabeth, like their like toddler phase, and like, can you like just describe? I'd like to hear like what you remember from it, and then hear Sarah's perspective as to like what that was like seeing it firsthand.
Personally, don't remember a ton from that either. Sorry, but I do remember seeing the tent that they had me in, and I would not stay in the bed no matter what. I was just like trying to get up all the time. I like could not walk very well. It was just a bad sign. And every time I had a different nurse because they had someone sitting with me 24/7, I didn't remember who they were. So I would just like look at my mom or someone else in the room and be like, who is this person sitting here? Like, what is this? But that's really all that I can recall from that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know. I mean, I think the way you described was like you're kind of relearning like how to do things and like process things. So like what was that like for you, Sarah, seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we all watched the movies, so just to, I guess, back up a sec. So Lizzie, they did put her into a medically induced coma, in the beginning to kind of make sure she wasn't putting too much stress on her brain and to kind of figure out what the injury she was dealing with. They did eventually take that off to try to see if she would wake up. And it took a few days, took longer than you might expect if you put like me at where I am right now into a medically induced coma. And so I think we all watch these movies where someone comes out of a coma, they bat their eyes and they look around and then they're just like, oh, you're here and here we are. And we just kind of pick up from there. And it was definitely very different. And I kind of describe it as, Lizzie went through like rebirth through all of the ages. And, it was learning how to communicate, learning how to use your limbs, learning how to walk, but also, emotionally and mentally to go through all of those stages that we go through as kids. And it was kind of shocking to see. And I think at some point you worry like, when is it going to stop? When are the improvements going to stop? Is she going to keep going, and continue to kind of get back to herself, or is it going to stop at a certain level and this will be this new version of Lizzie that we love but will be different than what we know. And so I think that was hard to go through, but also a really good lesson as like a med student who was a first year med student, really learning how different this could be, um, and sort of how to help somebody going through something like that.
And at that point, like, were they like cautiously optimistic or like what was like the team telling you guys in terms of like the trajectory for recovery?
Yeah, I think they were optimistic, but it was also like time. You don't know, we don't know. And the swelling in your her brain got better, the bleeding had stopped. So didn't have to do more invasive procedures like relieve pressure or put in a monitor to monitor the pressure or anything like that. But I think it was just time.
Mhm.
And, I remember the first day that Lizzie kind of woke up and asked for me, or no, she I remember getting this text message from my family like, Lizzie's asking for you. She wants to know where you are. And I remember like running to the hospital to be like, I just got to see her. That was such a special moment to like be like, she knows who I am. And then that was once you had gotten out of the ICU, and then we gave her computer back, and she had a trach placed because of all the injuries when they did the surgery to repair her jaw. They didn't want to leave a breathing tube in. They wanted to put a trach in for safety. She also had a feeding tube placed for nutrition, and so she couldn't really talk. But we gave her computer and she started to like type and would start to like type and communicate to us that way. Um, and it was just so special to start to see, you know, see her come back slowly. Just every moment, just appreciating all these new things, just like you would a new kid.
Like celebrating every like little bit of improvement.
Yeah.
And Elisabeth, I guess when you end up transitioning from the hospital to rehab, I think, does that kind of where you start to remember what was going on, or is it still a little foggy?
Still a little foggy, but I think like 2 weeks into that, because I was starting to do different activities and stuff, they also like took me, started giving me signs of like, I don't want to say the outside world, but like my life before. And I was kind of recognizing that like, I don't know, I was like channeling another person that I used to be, and I could like kind of start coming out of it. But I definitely still found myself going through the ages like even throughout the rest of therapy. I was still like learning to walk again, and still, I don't know, I don't think I got to like fully back to who I was until I came home
Mm-hmm.
back at the end of June.
What were some of the most challenging things that you can remember while in rehab? Like either most frustrating or most challenging?
I think my memory was a very, very challenging thing for me. Um, just to like the little activities that I look back on now and I'm like, oh wow, that's so stupid. But like recognizing one person and looking like seeing them on the page and their name and everything. They've taught me so many different skills on like how to remember people and how to pick out a sign and just different memory skills. And so now I kind of can do it a lot better. But I look back on that time and I'm like, how did I think that was so hard? The other thing was I thought about this a lot. What other thing in therapy? I think the fine motor skills was something that was very difficult. Even now, I don't have them all the way back. They're just like I don't know, like I blame it on my eyesight, but like a pen in the cap lid, like the cap, is still very difficult and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
And you mentioned your
I
eyes
don't
because I think you had prisms made, right? You had some kind of visual issues after the injury.
Yeah, in the lower quadrants, I have like double vision that has gotten a lot better, or I have found a way to like look over it.
Compensate.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And we
And
didn't
just
realize that until you got to it. We didn't realize that until she got to the rehab and started to walk. And we were noticing that she was like closing one eye or like, and you could see actually one of her eyes, it was like would,
Divergent.
yeah, at a certain way that she was looking, one of the eyes would basically not be in line with the other eye. And that's when we realized, oh, this is probably making a lot of things challenging for her from this like sort of nerve damage that I don't think has fully ever recovered, but you've definitely learned to compensate.
and it sounds like, you were really having to relearn everything. What was like keeping you motivated? It sounds like you had a lot of family support, and a great like rehab team. Like, are there any specific things you remember that like really like just kept you like wanting to keep pushing?
My family, like you said, were always pushing me and always like cheerleaders on that. I think it was just I get like a mindset and I'm like, I'm gonna do this. And I just like will do anything I can to basically win. I make like a competition with myself and I'm like, okay, you're gonna practice every day, you're gonna do this. And that's like the what like determination and just like the repeat process of like practicing all of your rehabs really helped me. I didn't necessarily, I think definitely in the future, I was like, I need to get to Philly and just start my job. I need to move on with my life.
You need to pass your CPA exams, which you did, and you were like crazy determined to do that.
Yeah, but I think I was just like, I need to get out of this hospital. I need to get my license back. I need to,
I mean, that's certainly like great motivation. Like at what point do you felt like I feel like myself again? Like how long do you think that took?
um, I would say close to probably like a year to like still questioning some things that I'm like, would this have been different if I didn't have an accident? But obviously that is a lot less now, significantly less. But I think for a year after the accident, I would ask people all the time. I was obsessed with asking people like, well, would I have done this if I like before the fall? Would pre-fall Lizzie have done this? Like I had labels for pre and post fall, and I was like obsessed with whether I was back to myself or not. And it was really hard because I couldn't tell that myself.
Mhm.
So I think that was the hardest part was just like, I don't know if I am or I'm not. And I'm sure I drove people nuts, but
What
I
would
did
you
anyway.
tell people like that are like going through like a rehab process or trying to get back to feeling like themselves? Like what like advice would you give them?
Um,
Okay.
I would just tell them they have to like find the determination to keep trying and to not give up on like day after day. It's going to be hard to continue doing your therapies if you're not doing them well, but you have to practice and just keep trying, because if you lose hope and faith, then it'll be a very difficult journey to get back to where you were. In terms of like finding like being able to recognize who you were, I think finding something you enjoyed to do before your accident and like re-finding that love for it really, really helped.
And I think you're referring to baking, is that right?
Yeah.
So for people, as just a bit of a background, I actually connected with Elisabeth because I would go to her bakery in Philadelphia, and I had seen on social media she was doing a fundraiser for, I think it was Spalding, right? Or one of
Mhm.
the Brain Foundation, one of their
Yeah.
groups, and that's how I ended up learning more about what had happened. So when you started baking, is that you think something that kept motivating you to kind of connect to your like pre like fall self?
Absolutely. I think in therapy, they actually had a kitchen in the rehab that I was in, and they took me into the rehab and they had me bake a batch of cookies, and they didn't taste good. But just like the act of doing it and getting back into that, I think the it was just like it made me kind of realign with who I was. And I think having something to always come back to, and baking is like a very unique thing because you can just do that by yourself and just like practice it and really like kind of bond with yourself. So it was really helpful to have that to do. So if you can ever, for the people that are recovering, if they can find something, a hobby that they had before, and maybe it would just help them align with their previous self.
That's great advice. Sarah, is there anything you would share with like family members or people that are like supporting a loved one that's like kind of going through this kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say you have to be patient, because it is a long process and a long journey. And I think you just want to try to support the person in the best way you can. Um, but I think I would also say, as Lizzie was talking about, now it's hard to find out who she was, who this person is now. I think as a loved one, you're also wondering who this person, how far are they going to be? You want the best for them. You want them to have and do whatever they want to do. And I think sometimes you can start to grieve, the loss of that person you knew, and who they were to you. But you also get to now meet this new person, exactly who they are, and get to know them and see them in a new light. And I think brain injury or not, anyone that goes through that kind of trauma, you come out, you're a different person. We all came out different people going through that. And so I think just not trying to force that person to be who you think they were, but just embracing everything that they are, the fact that they're still here with you. Um, and all of these moments you get to just cherish from here on out with this new perspective, from what could have been so different,
Hmm.
is I think
Well,
what's
thank you.
really important.
I mean, I really appreciate both you guys kind of sharing the story and going into a little bit more details. Any other final words you want to share with the listeners?
No, I think that's it.
Anything else from you, Sarah?
I mean, it's important to look back and think about these moments. I remember one time in the rehab when my mom and I were with her, we went down to get lunch and we came back and Lizzie had been circling the halls with her, like one on, assistant. And she said to us like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long. Like, where have you been?" And with her memory, she thought we'd been gone for like days. And now, you have these memories that stick in your head of these but now to like see her, this amazing woman who has accomplished so much and has just put her heart into everything she does. It's just really, I'm so grateful and just blessed to have her in my life.
Oh, well, we really appreciate you sharing, and I hope other people will read your story of hope. We'll include a link in the show notes and have the same patience that you guys did. So thanks for joining. We'll make sure that link is included in the show notes. To check out this or other Currents content, head to currents.neurocriticalcare.org. As a reminder, NCS offers free CME for select podcasts, listened by the NCS Learning Center, and complete a short survey to receive your credits. Otherwise, you can access the NCS podcast wherever you get your pods, and don't forget to add us to your favorites.